Well, hello there. My apologies. I realize that I am a whopping 12 minutes late today. Um, yes, Sasha is here. As I've said other times on my show, I work from home and I have duties, performing as Dr. Whimsy Anderson's assistant. I make a lot of phone calls to people all over the country on her behalf. Sometimes those calls bleed over, like today. So here I am, I hope better late than never. I thank you all for standing by me and putting up with these inconsistencies. So far, no one has joined in. I guess the announcement has to get out that I'm finally on the air. Let me adjust this a little bit here. Very impromptu. I had to drop everything I was doing when I saw how late it was. I had to try to fix my hair a little bit, wash my face, try to make myself camera ready. I shouldn't say I didn't have time to shave today, uh, but I do my best to honor this commitment to at least show up and be here. Let me find what it was I was drinking here. Um, if anything, this gives me a little time to unwind, a little time to relax, and to hang out with my friends. So I do enjoy doing the show. Excuse me here. And no, I'm not giving product endorsement to Starbucks. I keep making this mistake of grabbing this mug each time I do the show. That's supposed to be one of the things they tell us about YouTube. You're not supposed to have like brand names on your shirts, mugs, what have you. You're not supposed to be giving endorsements like that. Yes, Sasha is here. And I don't want her jumping on the keyboard and disconnecting the show. So I'm going to hold her just for a moment because with Sasha, it's all about me. Ow. And let's see who I have here. Oh, Joyce, you came through. Yeah, Anastasia said you might be busy. You might not have time. So thank you for coming through. And Sasha, come on. Behave. I'm going to try to put her down now. Right. Let's see. And Ward, you're here. Yeah, it's great to have you here. So I've already got an audience of two. Um, you know, Better than I deserve when I come on late like this with no announcement. I try really hard to wrap up my cause for the day, but somehow it's kind of like pulling the brakes on a locomotive train and trying to get that fast moving train to slow down and come to a halt. And that can even take some time. And Andy, thank you for joining. Well, hey, it's all my friends, my extended family here. It means a lot. How are you guys handling your Mercury? Everybody say hello to each other. How are you handling your Mercury retrograde right now? So far, I seem to be handling it, but we're early in the game. I think of a Marx Brothers film. Andy, you love the Three Stooges. I tend to gravitate toward the Marx Brothers. But this woman says to Groucho, I think it was Margaret Dumont, I've never been so insulted in all my life. And Groucho says, yeah, well, it's still early in the movie. So we're early into the Mercury retrograde. Who knows where this is going? What's happening for me right now is professionally, career-wise, things have really been accelerating. I'm handling it, but I'm having to be very careful to write things down, write down appointments, so forth, not just trusting it's going to remain in my head and I can work that way. I know better than that. Through trial and error, write things down, record things, even silly little things that have to be tended to. I have to make lists. Some people say that doesn't work so well for them. For me, it helps a lot because I tend to get overwhelmed and I have too much up in my head. Just by putting it on paper, it has less power over me because I can look at it objectively, and then I can also do a little triage and decide what needs to be tended to right away, what can be put off, and what can be put off for a long time. because sometimes I do it the opposite way when it's all up in my head. But right now, a lot of work has been coming my way. I've been getting more art commissions. I do the show with Dr. Whimsy Anderson, Taco Tuesdays. I've talked about that many times. We do that on Tuesdays. She's asked me now to do the Thursday show with her. Sorry, Sasha is just all over the place. She's quite an incorrigible little girl, but I love her. Yeah. Yes, I love you, Sasha. Now behave. Whimsy wants me now to do a Thursday show with her. And I'm just going with it. It's doubling my responsibilities in that respect, because when I do her show, it's like the antithesis of this one. This one, I go on here and I have the luxury of being freeform. I can go on here and not be too prepared, just start talking. I have a few topics in mind. You wonderful people give me questions and topics, and I work from there. Whimsy show is much more news oriented, current events, and there's a lot more responsibility in that, at least for me. We get very big numbers with her show, and I feel I have a responsibility to be prepared, to be reasonably authoritative. But I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard the term imposter syndrome. A lot of people have this, where, we're outwardly, we're all confident and together, and inside we're like, I'm not qualified to do this. I can't do this. So, I worry about things like that. Like, when I go on there and talk authoritatively, am I prepared enough? Do I have enough of a background? Have I done my homework? And usually I have, but that fear is always there. And so in doing a Thursday show, I'm going to have to double down and do it there as well. But I'm also looking at this as a blessing, because it does keep me on my toes. It does take me out of my comfort zones. There's that saying, do something every day that scares the hell out of you, something you don't think you can do, because often you surprise yourself. And that has been the case for me. And Dr. Whimsy Anderson is also, she's my dear friend. She's frankly family to me. We go back more than a decade. We used to work together here in Los Angeles. And all throughout the course of our friendship, she has consistently taken me out of my comfort zone. She's nudged me, pushed me. Come on, you can do this. You're going to do this. In fact, the reason I'm doing this live stream right now is because of her. Because she persuaded me to do her show. I was kicking and I was screaming and I was rebelling. I can't go on live, Whimsy. And she's like, oh, yes, you can. And she finally got me on. Get on her show. I must have made a slew of mistakes, sound mistakes, camera mistakes, lighting mistakes, me making mistakes. But she was patient with me. And she kept guiding me and saying, you can do this. You can do this. You have this in you. You've got this. And I got increasingly comfortable with it. And I went over and started my own channel. I started making videos on topics that I love. And you know what those topics are. Old Hollywood. I Love Lucy. We talk about it here. I keep this live stream going and, in place of those videos for now, because I just have so many other things going on. But Whimsy, persuaded me to jump into this beautiful arena, and in turn, like my dear friend Anastasia, who will be on tonight, 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, the Sacred Spheres channel. She started doing live streams because I'm doing live streams, and I've been nudging other people. So it's like we keep paying it forward, and it's just a delicious world to be in. But one of the things Whimsy has me do on her show, and I rarely, if ever, do it here, we both do intuitive readings, oracle. I work mainly with oracle card readings. She works with tarot. So we complement each other. But we do on the air predictions. We read into energy. And she even has me doing this professionally, private readings for people. And that's something I resisted for the longest time. I knew I could do it, But I was like, am I good enough to take money for this? Is this valid? Well, people I read for have said, yes, you're very good at what you do. But I remain extremely humble about it. Very humble. No ego in this. I just look at whatever comes to me as God given. I even look that way with my artwork, my writing, anything I do. It's God given. It's a gift. And so it's as those of us who hold a talent, a gift, it's our responsibility to use that to the best that we can for others. At least that's my belief. It's all about what we do for others. So I've been doing professional readings, and we did the show last Thursday, and it went well. It went well, and I ended up getting a number of people contacting me wanting readings, and I've actually got us an appointment book filled up for this week. I have a reading I'm doing tonight. This evening, I explained to her I wanted to watch my dear friend Anastasia's show first, but I would be happy to read for her tonight. So that's what I'm going to do. And I figured this is all good for me. Sometimes it's good just to dive into the deep end of the water, which is sometimes how I feel when I do a show like this. Just dive into the water, go on live. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But I approach it from a place of sincerity. And, something did come up on the show last Thursday because it was kind of a spur of the moment thing. And I'm just going to talk about it here because you're my friends and I have a smaller audience too. But I'm going to ask Whimsy her own opinion on this and get her permission because there's something I wanted to address with one of our viewers last week. And I want to do it in a very classy, gracious way. But I'm also mindful that during a Mercury retrograde, a lot of things get misconstrued and misunderstood. So we have to be very careful. But the viewer said, it was addressed to Whimsy and myself, why do you two act so surprised when you get the same answers every week when you're doing your readings? Because we have been getting some very similar things about what's going on with the president, the government right now, and so forth. And Whimsy answered, and I felt it was sufficient for both of us. And when you're doing a live show like that, and you've got a big audience, and you've got a lot of questions, you've got to keep it moving. You can't dwell too long. But anyway, I didn't answer my part of it, and somebody wrote, well, Chuck has no backbone. Okay, I will admit that pissed me off. But I also know you don't react to things like that on the air. You take your time, you think, you cool off. And certainly it was not appropriate there. I didn't want to alienate an audience member. I didn't want to start an argument. I knew we needed to move on to the next topic. But I'm going to ask her if I can address this tomorrow, because what I would have said, I come from a heartfelt, sincere place when I read. And when I do this, I clear the slate. It doesn't matter what came up in a reading the week before, or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It doesn't matter. I clear all that out. I clear my head. I come from a very blank, neutral place. It's like clearing the palette or wiping the slate clean. There are all kinds of cliches for it, but I come from a very neutral place, quiet. And so when I'm doing a live on the air reading like that, and I'm like, I get a surprise with an oracle card, even though it's something I might have gotten a week or two before, I'm getting it sincerely in that moment. So I should have said that last week. I'm going to talk it over with Whimsy. She may say, Chuck, just drop it. But if I can, I maybe explain that tomorrow on the show. And here I am saying it to you. So maybe it's a little bit of a dress rehearsal. Now, speaking of keeping the show moving along and questions, I need to scroll back here because obviously I haven't been reading your comments because I've been talking to the camera. But let's see here. And of course, Andy's here. Hi, Andy, Joyce, and Ward, and Stephen. Hi, Stephen. And is Whimsy here? Whimsy here? I thought I saw there. Someone said, hi, Whimsy. I don't know if she's here. She might be watching. In fact, if Whimsy just heard what I just said, I may not have to explain. She may just say, no, Chuck, don't talk about this. Or, yeah, go ahead, whatever. But anyway, it's a new adventure for me, doing these things, taking big leaps of faith and chances and seeing the rewards in it. And I guess what I've been trying to say right from the start is my dear friend, Dr. Whimsy Anderson, has just been an angel to me and such a guide. And she pushes me out of my comfort zones. And here I am now. Andy, Joyce, Stephen. Let's see, people saying hello to each other. What else is on here? Andy, I would be better if I could figure out how to get Facebook back. Now it's saying my accounts are disabled and I don't know how to get them back. Andy, you had mentioned that. I think you mentioned that to me and to Anastasia. My friend, I am so sorry. I wish I had some advice for you there. I'm trying to navigate this myself. And the way Facebook is structured, it's just terrible. Instagram is just the same way. You can't get anyone to talk to. You can't get any kind of customer assistance. They make these bizarre decisions. Sometimes don't tell you why, or they don't tell you adequately why. So it's maddening. Excuse me. I haven't found a gracious way to drink and talk at the same time on camera. So please pardon me. And you said, I go with cue card training for Bob Hope. It is an art to be able to read a cue card. I used to be in Dee Wallace's acting class. We did a lot of cold readings with scripts, and you had to learn how to glance down at a script, scoop up the words, and look up again and look at your partner and say what was just on that page. That takes practice and training, and it took me quite a while to learn to do that. And in fact, when I do Whimsy Show, I have a lot of notes. I have my iPad in front of me, and I spend the day typing up notes. I pour through all the news stories. I listen to newscasts. I particularly love Heather Cox Richardson, David Pakman. I listen to Mary Trump, Pete Buttigieg put some really good things on YouTube. Rachel Maddow. I try to also look at other news sources and see what the issues are of the day, and I just start typing up lots of notes, highlights, and then I highlight words. So when I'm talking to Whimsy on camera to the audience, I can glance down at my iPad, and those words that I've highlighted make the sentence jump out a little better. And I let Whimsy pretty much determine the course of the show. She gives me show notes beforehand, but generally topics, she will bring them up, or the audience members are. So I have to be prepared with my iPad to be able to scroll all over the place. Okay, I got something here that pertains to that, and I have to do it quickly, smoothly, kind of make it as best I can, give the illusion that it's effortless. But that's what I do with her shows. I have to be a lot more prepared. So it's kind of fun just to go here and just whatever, just go with the flow. Andy, that would have been a fun job if he needed a cue card person in his life. Let me tell you, Bob Hope was very, very dependent on his cue cards. I don't think the man could have functioned without his cue cards. And he also couldn't have functioned without his enormous team of writers. Bob Hope, he was a very talented man. Don't get me wrong. There's a reason that man became such a big star. But from what I understand, he rarely came up with any of his own material. Everything was written for him. He was dependent on that. He was dependent on the cue cards. He also did topical humor. Almost all of his humor was topical. So unfortunately, his work has not aged well. He's largely forgotten about now, or he's becoming forgotten about, because younger generations are just not discovering him. For a great artist to survive, like say Lucille Ball, I Love Lucy plays all over the country multiple times a day and has been doing so for 74 years all over the world. So she keeps finding new audiences, new generations. For someone like Bob Hope and all of his topical humor, it's more of a novelty on YouTube or something, but it does not replay well. So he's rapidly being forgotten about. So much so, here in Burbank, there is Bob Hope Airport. And there's talk of even renaming the airport because a lot of people don't even know who Bob Hope is anymore. That was the reasoning. They needed to have a name that was more recognizable for travelers. Thankfully, they haven't taken his name off the airport just as yet, but I did read in the news that it was being considered. Award said, Andy, not if you've got the cards in the wrong order. That happens. Whimsy and I, we do a once a month book club, an author interview. And the author that we interviewed just last week, she had a funny story in her book. She was living in Japan and she had a yoga studio. And this television comedy show that was done live asked her if she would be a guest on there and talk about her yoga studio and so forth. And the person who did the cue cards did not speak English very well, was not fluent in the language. And so it was all of this broken English on the cue cards that made no sense. And she said she was seeing the cards for the first time live on the air. And I think they were even mixed up a little. And she had no choice but to just start reading the cards. And it was nonsense. But she said it worked out because she started laughing and the host of the show started laughing. And then the audience started laughing. And it actually helped her business. People recognized her on the street and came up to her and said, "Oh my God, you were so funny on your show." And that was because someone messed up the cue cards. Let's see, where's some other comments here. Joyce, I think I found you and Chuck on Instagram. I sent you a message. Oh, Andy, I rarely, if ever, go on Instagram anymore, but yeah, I'll be on the lookout. I need to be able, maybe if I had a straw, I could drink faster here. Let's see what I say. Let's see. Good night, friends. My guest tonight are, this is Bob. Oh, hello, friends. Welcome to my show. Oh, yeah. I see what you mean there. And my scroll just disappeared. I just tried to move it up and the whole thing went blip. So let me get back here, find my place again. This is one of the things I mean about being on live and making mistakes. Ward, yeah, it's better to think before answering. Too bad that seems to be an unpopular today, nowadays. Yeah. Yes. Yes, think before you talk. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Andy. You said I thought I saw your name mentioned. Asaja is one of her followers on Instagram. Yes, I am on Instagram. I just said I rarely, if ever, go on there. I just, there's a lot I just don't have time for. I'm doing, frankly, good if I can get on Facebook or something or do this, but once in a while I check out Instagram. But I haven't put a new posting on there in, I don't even remember. I last put something on Instagram. Brenda Allen. Yes, I did say I'm from Narrows, Virginia. Yes. Spent the first 18 years of my life there. Do you think it? You know Narrows? One thing that's interesting about Narrows, almost nobody's ever heard of it. That's one thing. I usually have to say, well, do you know where Blacksburg is? Do you know Virginia Tech? Okay, I'm about 45, 50 minutes from there. And then they know. Or I mentioned Roanoke, Virginia, which was about, I think roughly an hour and a half away. The people knew those. But my town, almost no one's ever heard of. But once I was talking to the lovely actress Linda Lavin, who, of course, just passed away a few months ago. Oh, lovely lady, so sweet. And she lived for a time with her husband in Wilmington, North Carolina. I think they lived there maybe 17 years or more. But anyway, she said they were always taking road trips and went through Virginia and all. And just where I was from, and I said, "Oh, Narrows, Virginia." She goes, "I've been there." I said, "You're kidding me. You're kidding me. You've been to Narrows, Virginia?" And she said, "Yeah, I know the area. I've driven through there." So that was kind of sweet. And there's another story about a celebrity sighting in Narrows. My fifth grade teacher had this story. And my fifth grade teacher was a very serious woman. She was not one to make up stories or embellish. She meant what she said. And she said it was in the 1930s when she was a college student. And yeah, I'm old. And my teacher, when I had her in the fifth grade, she was 1 year away from retirement. So yes, she went to college in the 1930s. And she said there was this beautiful Cord convertible parked out in front of the drugstore. I mean, fanciest car she'd ever seen in her life. And there was this woman with short red hair and coming out of the drugstore. Apparently she was on a road trip or something, driving around. And she saw my teacher with her suitcase, and she said, "Well, where are you going?" And she said, "Well, I'm going to the bus station to go back to college. I've been on break." And the woman said, "But that's like 4 miles away." And she said, "Oh yes, I'm walking." And she said, "Get in my car. I'm giving you a ride." And they were talking, and it turned out the woman was Amelia Earhart. Amelia Earhart was in my town and gave my teacher a ride. Now, I should check some other comments here. Let's see here. Oh, yes, we can talk about the passing of Malcolm Jamal Warner. I just want to check some comments here. First, I promise I'll come back to it in just a moment. I just want to make sure, because see if Brenda had anything else to say about my hometown, because she's the one who asked me about that. Let's see. Yes. Isn't that amazing, Ward? Miss Earhart was in my town. I normally, if someone told that story, I'd be like, yeah, right. But my teacher was a serious woman. Very no nonsense, no humor. She just said the facts. So she said it. I know it was true. And it's not impossible. Amelia Earhart could have just been on a road trip, a little adventure. We know she was an adventurous woman. So I don't know. I'm guessing this was roughly 1935 or so, 36, in that area, you know. So anyway, Malcolm Jamal Warner. I don't know a whole lot about him. The Cosby Show, of course. I don't know a lot about what he was doing after the Cosby Show. I saw in the news he was only 54. And as I understand it, he was on vacation. Was it Mexico? I don't know. Or the Caribbean. I'm not sure. But he was swimming in the ocean, and a current or a riptide carried him out to sea. And I'm assuming his body was found at washed ashore, but of course he had drowned. And I've heard horror stories about riptides doing that. I immediately thought back to a time when I was in Hawaii many, many years ago. And normally I'm cautious when it comes to the ocean. In fact, I got to tell you, I don't even go in the ocean that much. Sharks, jellyfish, riptides. I just don't do it. I mean, I like being by the ocean. I love the water very much, but I just going into it's another story. But I got in a kayak, and to this day, I am astounded at how far out into the ocean I went. I mean, it was probably dangerous what I did. I went really far from the shore. I mean, like the horizon line. If I'd gone out much further, the horizon line might have disappeared. I don't know what got into me, but something about Hawaii, there's a beautiful energy there, and I just felt very safe in doing that. But God, could have been swept out to sea. But that is such a tragic story about Mr. Warner. Tragic story, and I'm so sorry for him and for his family. And I know the Cosby Show brought a lot of joy to people. I was never a huge follower of it, but I know it was the number one show for several years back in the 1980s. Very influential. And a few shows I have watched, I've always been impressed with the quality of the writing and the acting. And the show often had good messages in it as well. For example, um, Bill Cosby was, education was always very dear to him. So his character of Cliff Huxtable, he was also very much about education, making sure his children were well educated. And of course, he was a doctor. His wife was a lawyer, a very intelligent family that was depicted, a very positive image. Um, it's sad what has happened to the Cosby Show because when Bill Cosby got caught up in all of his scandal, it took the show down as well. I don't know, maybe the climate has cleared in the last few years, but I know for quite a while it was dropped from syndication. Nobody wanted to carry the show. Um, the DVDs were hard to get. I don't know. That may change. I think history will balance things out because it is a good show. It's just unfortunately associated with a lot of negativity about Bill Cosby now, his personal life. Um, but anyway, I don't know if any of you have anything to add about Malcolm Jamal Warner. That's all I know of him from the story. It just broke today. Um, let's see, where's some other comments here. Let's see. Oh, it was Costa Rica. Thank you, Ward. I said Mexico. I knew that wasn't probably right. Let's see. Oh, yeah, Ward, you mentioned Bob Hope was in a movie, W.C. Fields, back in 1938. Yeah, I think that was called The Big Broadcast of 1938. And yeah, and also I think weren't George Burns and Gracie Allen in that also? Or maybe I'm thinking of another movie because there was a movie also in 1933 with W.C. Fields called International House that had George Burns and Gracie Allen in it also. And also Rosemary, who was still being billed as baby Rosemary. A lot of people may not know this, and many do. She was a huge child star, a singer. This little girl with this very mature voice who on the radio sounded almost like an adult, and so she appeared in some movies. And let's see, there was another one. I think it was, these were all Paramount films. So they were doing these little all-star things because there was another one with I think 34 with Bing Crosby, Carol Lombard, Ethel Merman, and George Burns and Gracie Allen. Frankly, it's not that good of a movie, but it's such a great cast. One of those things where the cast is so good and you want the movie to be good, but it wasn't. Oh, well. What was this? Andy, I heard he always didn't want any of the other stars getting any of the laughs compared to him. You mean Bob Hope? I have heard that. I heard he had quite an ego. Unless it was a real peer of his, like, for example, Lucille Ball. They loved each other, and I'm sure Bob Hope didn't mind someone like that getting a laugh. But I think Bob Hope was, because his shows were always written. There was very little spontaneity on any of his shows, any of his specials. Everything was just written out and planned to the last detail. So I'm sure everything was structured inherently to throw more laughs his way. And I guess people who guested with him just had to understand that about him. Pardon me there. Oh my gosh, Andy, one of your grandfathers saw Mr. Fields in New York City back in 1915. Yes, juggling. W.C. Fields was originally a juggler in vaudeville. Oh, wow. And your father told him about all of his impressions. Oh my gosh, now that's exciting. That is really exciting. We're definitely not in Naras anymore. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've lived in Los Angeles for 40 years. Before I lived in Los Angeles, I left my hometown to go to college in Richmond, Virginia, and then I stayed there 3 years after graduation. So I lived there for 7 years, but I was plotting my move and came out here, and I've been here for 40 years now. But it's such a different world, and there are things that I've gotten used to being here. For example, when you live in Los Angeles, you hear me telling all these celebrity encounters that I have. Well, that's no big deal, honestly, in Los Angeles. Anybody who lives in this city is going to have their own celebrity stories. It's a city of literally thousands of celebrities, minor, big, A-list, you name it, soap opera actors, sitcom actors, TV, movies, supporting players, people in the music industry, right? There's news, politics. We have thousands of celebrities here. And when I was working in the health industry, I encountered so many there, but you also just encounter them in, honestly, the grocery store, the post office. You can go to Target and run into someone like Candace Bergen. You really can. So when I relay these stories to people back in my hometown, I've gone back there, they think I'm like this big deal. Like I'm a celebrity also. And I'm like, no, it's not. I promise you, it's not a big deal. But I realize from the perspective of a small town, it is a big deal when I mentioned somebody that I've met. And, I just go flow. I flow with it, but I always try to be humble about it, and emphasize, no, I'm not trying to brag. I'm not trying to name drop. This is like one morning Anne Hathaway walked into my store, and I thought, now how many people can say at 9 o'clock in the morning at their workplace, Anne Hathaway walks in, but that's just my life. That's just the truth, the reality. Let's see. Definitely not in narrows anymore. Do you think that question was in the narrow margin? I'm not sure if I understand, Danny. Hi, Danny. Yeah, hey, welcome here. Thank you for joining. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to scroll through the comments here, and I've said many times, I wish YouTube had this set up like a teleprompter where you wouldn't see it, but I would see it, the rolling commentary beneath me, so I can look into the screen and read. But no. So I have to glance over here from time to time. And so I am so sorry if I miss something somebody says. I promise I'm not trying to be rude or dismissive. That's the last thing I'd ever want to do with any of you fine people. And I'm laughing because everybody's saying hello to each other again. About to have dinner while you chat here tonight. And let's see what you mentioned about Miss Earhart. Okay, I got to really scroll down here. So Brenda. Okay, getting back to you, Brenda. I was looking for your comments. You live in Blacksburg, so you know Narrows. You know Giles County. How exciting! I love Blacksburg. I love it very much. When I was growing up in Narrows, there was just nothing there. I'm sorry. I don't mean to say that as a put down, but like if I wanted to see a movie, okay, Brenda, you know Parisburg, I'm sure. We had one movie theater there. That was about 4 miles from Narrows. But typically the movie would be about 8 months to a year old before it would ever get there. And also there was no place to shop. Like whenever my parents and I needed to buy, like this is before Amazon and stuff, obviously pre-internet, we'd have to go to Roanoke, like where there was a Sears and a Kmart and things like that, just things that we take for granted in the city, but we didn't have those things. So if we needed to buy clothes, appliance stuff, or if I just wanted to buy some more books, because I was always getting my hands on books in those days, we'd have to go to Blacksburg or Roanoke or Princeton. But Blacksburg has a special place in my heart, Brenda, because when I was 16 and I got my driver's license, I could drive to Blacksburg to see a first run movie. And that meant a lot to me. That was freedom for me. I just love the little, it's a great college town. And I was 16, so I was a couple of years away from when I was going to go away to college. So I was vicariously living for the college students there and kind of getting a preview of what my life was going to be in the very near future. And that excited me. But yeah, it's a wonderful area. Oh, I'm so happy you're here. I'm happy you found me. Wow, this is wonderful. Ward, I believe it because you're talking about Amelia Earhart. Yes, her husband, uh, uh, George Putnam, I believe. Her husband, very wealthy. Well, she was wealthy also. Amelia Earhart, she was very big on the professional lecture circuit during the 1930s. And she also did a lot of product endorsements, radio appearances. She made her own money too, but I'm sure between the two of them, she could afford to have a nice long convertible. Let's see. Oh, Extreme Brands just came from a theater meeting for my school, determining next season's plays. Oh, you may direct 20th Century. Ben Heck, Charles MacArthur. Oh, yeah. Well, I certainly know the movie very well. Carol Lombard and John Barrymore. I slam the iron gate down on you. I love that. And then, of course, there's the 20th Century, the musical. I don't know if you're talking about the play, the musical, but you probably were talking about the play with Ben Heck, Charles MacArthur. But it's been revived a few times on Broadway. And I know it originally starred the wonderful Madeline Kahn in the Carol Lombard role on Broadway when it was a musical. But I understand it had a really, really demanding operatic score. And Madeline Kahn had to drop out after, I think, 3 weeks, because when you're doing 8 shows a week like that, it just takes enormous fortitude and training to save your voice to do a show like that. And apparently it was just way too much vocal strain for her. That was the official reason she left the show anyway. I don't know if there was more to the story. I even think about, so when like Audra McDonald, is starring on Broadway right now in Gypsy. If you know Audra McDonald, she's won 6 Tony Awards, the most anyone has ever won. She's the only person to ever win a Tony in every single acting category, both supporting lead for straight play and for musical. It's quite a feat. Anyway, she's doing Gypsy right now. And I don't know if you saw the Tony Awards, but they did the big number, the Mama's Turn, which is it's almost like an aria to itself. And I just was astounded, Audra, what she was with her voice, the way she was pushing herself, the way she was yelling and croaking out the words, because it was emotion. She was in the motion of the moment. And it was breathtaking to watch. But I thought, how does this woman do 8 performances a week of this, especially with her beautiful, beautiful soprano, her beautiful singing voice? But she obviously knew how to take care of her voice. I'm sure she worked with trainers. She was given specific exercises, things to do to not damage her voice, but still to get those effects. But it's a real balancing act. I think about Julie Andrews. I've talked about her on here. When she did Victor Victoria on Broadway, that's what ruined her voice. She had nodules on her vocal cords because, the score, she has to, it's about the woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman. So she had to sing very high and soprano, and then also sing low and do that. And so it took a big toll on her voice doing 8 shows a week. And of course, she had to have surgery, and she went to a top vocal doctor, had been highly recommended. But I still don't know the whole story, if it was a case of the surgeon botching the operation or if she had just done too much damage to her voice. But anyway, she lost her singing voice, most of her singing voice anyway. And I've told the story before. I'll just mention it again. Anyone hasn't heard it, and where I worked, Blake Edwards, her husband, came in once and we asked him about it. And he had tears in his eyes. He said, "It's the saddest thing you've ever seen. That beautiful voice is gone. It's gone." He was almost ready to cry. So I could only imagine the pain Julie Andrews and he were in. Julie Andrews even said it was so traumatic for her because her voice was her identity. It's what she was known for. It was what she became famous for. And I've also told this story of how years later she was hosting an evening at the Hollywood Bowl, and I was there. And it was an evening of Broadway music, and it was billed that she would just be the host. And she came out. I'm sorry, I'm telling a story again here, but it applies. They brought down a big movie screen, and they showed that infamous clip from the opening of The Sound of Music. The hills are alive, where she's twirling and all that. And Julie Andrews came out. She was standing in front of the movie screen, and it was over. And the audience applauded, and she said, "I wish I could still sing like that lady up on that screen. I can't, but I'm going to try my best for you tonight." And the audience just went crazy. I was like, oh my God, she's going to sing. And it turned out Julie still has her lower range. Remember in Victor Victoria, if you've ever seen the movie, when she's singing as Victor in that lower range, and she can still do that. And so she sang My Funny Valentine, which is, I didn't realize how what a limited range that song has, and it's lower, but it worked for her voice where it is now, and she sang it beautifully. And I am so thrilled to this day that I got to sit in the audience and hear Julie Andrews sing. Anyway, enough of that, right? I better get back to my comments here. Andy, isn't it hard to save somebody when they are caught in a riptide? That's a good question. That's probably something a trained lifeguard could talk about. I bet you could even Google search that question. I've always heard, thank God I've never been caught in that situation, but I've always heard that if you are caught in a riptide, you don't panic. First of all, yeah, easier said than done, but you don't panic. Stay calm and just swim in the direction of the riptide until it breaks away, and then you can break loose from that. And it might mean actually going far out into the ocean, but you just swim in the direction of the riptide, because if you resist it, it's just going to bring you down further, and you're going to end up exhausting yourself. You're going to get overwhelmed. And I think there's much more of a likelihood of drowning. And that might have happened to Mr. Warner, for all we know, when he got caught in the riptide. I mean, it's a terrifying thing. Terrifying. And I don't know that I could be level-headed and calm in a situation like that. Though I have been in life-threatening situations where I've been surprised by. Sasha can't make up her mind. She wants me to pick her up, and then she wants me to put her down. So anyway, here's Miss Sasha the Siamese, saying hello to everybody. But I have twice in my life been held up at gunpoint. And this is the closest thing I can compare it to, because it's a life-threatening situation. One time the person fired, I guess to make a point, fired the gun, the bullet went past my head. I'm sure he did that just to shake me up, and yes, it worked. But what I remember is I became very, very calm. It was almost involuntary. And I think that's survival instinct kicking in. What I remember was just getting very grounded, very calm, very still, and just looking the person in the eye. And just taking it moment by moment. So that's the closest thing I can compare to that, where the survival instinct kicks in. I don't know if that would happen if I were caught in a riptide or something. At that same calmness would come over me, like, okay, let's just take it step by step. This is what you do. You swim in the direction of the tide until you're free. I don't know. I don't want to be in that position, but what was this here? Ward, greetings. Ironic that Mr. MacArthur is less remembered than his widow, Helen Hayes, or their son, James MacArthur. Yeah. And, I just found out not too long ago that James MacArthur, their son, was adopted. I always assumed he was her birth son, but, well, I guess I can understand. I believe, Helen Hayes is probably much better remembered because aside from her brilliant stage career, she also did movies, won 2 Oscars, and she did a lot of television, as did their sons. So naturally, being in front of the camera, being in the forefront, they're going to be a lot more remembered than someone who was a writer. It's just, those are just the facts. So that's my own theory there. Yeah, Mr. Ward played a very likable character on that show. It was a beautiful cast. Few times I have watched the show, I've always been impressed with it, and I can see why it became #1 and so influential. What was this saying? I've noticed people who have done wrong about Cosby, they would forgive them, but why not forgive Cosby? Is it wrong to say celebrities are human too, and we're all make the same mistakes? Well, no, I agree with you, Andy. I mean, it's really horrible what came out about Cosby, and I'm not going to go into it here. We all know that. But certainly, I think sometimes with celebrities are human. Believe me, I've met so many of them. I know that for a fact. They're just human like you and me. We all make mistakes, and sometimes people get really judgmental. Like, for example, Jane Fonda, and I'm not going to get into the politics here of that, but people tend to still condemn her to this day. And I actually had a discussion with someone once about how he said, well, that's unforgivable. I will never forgive her. And I said, well, the things Jane Fonda did that you're talking about, she did when she was like in her late 20s, early 30s. She was in a different place in her life, a different mindset. And I said, how would you like to be judged for things that you did in your 20s or 30s? I'm sure you were not walking on water. I'm sure you were making some pretty big mistakes too. You just weren't famous and being condemned for it. We need to be open-hearted about these things, but it's also personal. I could go much further with this conversation. I just don't really want to do this on this show, but there's some really bad things about Bill Cosby. It was so disappointing, and that's one of the reasons his show, in syndication and so forth, the reputation has been so badly damaged, because on the show, in fact, he was actually called this back in the 1980s, America's dad. He was like this wonderful father figure, wise authority, and then it turns out in real life, not quite so. And so I think people have trouble separating those images. So I think time is going to be the deciding factor here, how this plays out and how much things will be forgiven. Will the show get rediscovered by other generations? I don't know. We shall see. Let's see here. My comments just blipped on me again. When I go down, it jumps. So let me find my place again. Oh boy, I've missed a lot of comments here while I was talking. Okay, I gotta go back here. Okay, baby Rosemary had her own radio show. Oh yeah, quite talented. I've seen films of her when she was a little girl. Oh, in fact, all you have to do is go on YouTube. You can see them, baby Rosemary. And I was at an event at the Motion Picture Academy a number of years ago. It was for the 90th anniversary of The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson, which it's credited as being the first sound movie. That's not true. Not true at all. There are plenty of sound movies before The Jazz Singer. It's just that's the movie that made it to the history books as the first. And anyway, they had Rosemary as a guest that night because, frankly, she was one of the few survivors of anyone who had appeared in those early sound movies. And they showed one of her short subjects as little baby Rosemary standing on top of the piano, and you saw how good she was. Andy Ward, how about this name, Baby Snooks? Oh yeah, the wonderful Fanny Bryce. I love old radio shows. I've listened to a lot of the Baby Snooks shows. That had some clever writing. Fanny Bryce was a magnificent, consummate comedian. And of course, we know Fanny Bryce because Barbara Streisand won an Academy Award for playing her in the movie Funny Girl and the sequel Funny Lady, and of course before that the Broadway musical Funny Girl. And Ray Stark, the producer, was married to Fanny Brice and Nick Arnstein's daughter Frances. So that's why it's a little sanitized. The Nicky Arnstein, the gangster husband, is cleaned up, and they make him more like Prince Charming and so forth. The real life story is a lot different. He was like in and out of prisons. I think he was in Sing Sing for a while. Fanny used to visit him. I was reading that he embezzled a lot of Fanny's money, but she loved him anyway. And of course, the end of Funny Girl, Barbara Streisand sings, "Oh, my man, I love him so." You'll never know. Worked her way to an Oscar. And also I can work in some I Love Lucy here, because Jess Oppenheimer, who was the head writer and producer of the Baby Snooks radio show in the 1940s, went on to be the head writer and producer for a radio show Lucille Ball was doing called My Favorite Husband. And the show was a big hit. And CBS, this was in the late 1940s, CBS wanted Lucy to turn it into a television show. And she brought Jess Oppenheimer and two other writers on the show, Bob Carroll Jr. and Madeline Pugh Davis, brought them all over to do her television show. And that this is a whole other story here we'll go into about how Desi entered the picture and stuff. And I've talked about it before. But Jess wrote for the Lucy Ricardo character a lot like he wrote for Fanny Brice's Baby Snooks, because Baby Snooks was the little girl. I mean, everybody was in on the joke. It was a full-grown middle-aged woman playing this little girl on radio, sort of a child woman. And there was Daddy, Hanley Stafford, always pointing the finger at Snooks and setting her straight. Well, basically, that was Lucy Ricardo and Ricky. Lucy was the child woman, and Ricky was like Daddy with the little girl. That's how they wrote it. And that all came out of Baby Snooks. And also, Lucille Ball and Fanny Brice were very good friends in real life. And Lucy had a radio talk show in 1964. And she interviewed Barbara Streisand while she was on Broadway and Funny Girl. And she mentioned to Barbara, "I knew Fanny very well. And let me tell you something, Fanny would have been thrilled to have you play her. She would have been honored. She would have known you were the perfect person to play her life." So what a compliment was that. Let's see. Now, what are some other comments here? Andy, did I get the name wrong? I'm not sure who you're referring to there. Getting back to W.C. Fields, is it true he didn't want any of the humor to go to any of the other cast besides him? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about Bob Hope, because that was true about Bob Hope. W.C. Fields, I don't know that for authoritative fact, but the little I know of his personality, I have a feeling his ego was such. And this is true for a lot of comedic actors and stars in films. They have to protect their image. They're the star, so they have to look like a star. They have to come across like a star. They have to be the center of attention. They're supposed to be. So I have a feeling that might have been the mindset W.C. Fields was coming from. Ward Putnam. Didn't I say Putnam? Who did I say? I thought I'd said Putnam. Was Miss Earhart's publisher husband. A new one that was at the Roundabout. Alec Baldwin and Anne Heche did the adaptation. That's great. Two great actors. Oh yes, Extreme Brands. I saw that they're closing Gypsy now. They're closing early. I have a feeling that might have to do with the fact that Audra did not win the Tony. I don't know what the box office is. I don't know if sales have been down since then. I would think that people would be clamoring to see Audra McDonald in that role. right up to the very end. But the show is so demanding, as I was mentioning earlier, for Audra. I was even concerned for her, and I watched the Tony Awards, and it seemed like she was straining her voice terribly. Her voice is a treasure, and I so Audra, be careful. But I'm sure she's well trained and knows what she's doing. She wouldn't do that otherwise. And she's also a splendidly gifted actress. Even if she couldn't sing a note, she's a wonderful actress. So I'm sure she knows how to do things like that, but make it look spontaneous in the moment. That's my best guess. But that might be a reason for her dropping out of the show. She was on The View. I saw a rerun of it not too long ago. And she was wiped out, exhausted. I don't, I've done theater myself. I know how hard that is. And my God, 8 performances a week, and for such a role, and also the expectations, and you're someone like Audra McDonald, the reputation you've got to maintain, and some people pay hundreds of dollars for those tickets. So it's responsibility to go out there and to be the best you can possibly be. Andy, nobody's agreeing with me or disagreeing on what I said. What was that, please? Let's see. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to ignore you, Andy. I did. What was it that we did not agree or disagree with you? If you could please repeat that, and I'll try to see it this time. And Goddess Val. Hi, I did not care for Audra's rendition. Tyne Daly's the best I've ever seen. And I'm kicking myself for not seeing Tyne Daly when she did it here in Los Angeles, but I've seen the clips. And you want to talk about a great actress, Tyne Daly, and she brought so many dimensions to it. I've also seen I've seen several clips of Patti LuPone, and Patti LuPone won a Tony for it. And I thought she was wonderful. Audra's rendition has been controversial. And I didn't realize that until after the Tony Awards. And then I started to see the clip appear in social media, and I started reading the comments. It's kind of a love-hate thing with the performance. It's extraordinarily intense. And she is playing Mama Rose as an ultimate narcissist, almost psychopathic, like losing her mind. The narcissist who has been hit with harsh reality, and she's just it's almost like, at times I felt like it was primal screaming she was doing, and agony and sweating and tears, and like she was having a nervous breakdown on stage. Quite a performance. But that's what I mean. I don't know how you sustain that night after night after night, especially when you've got this treasure of a voice and you've got to protect it. But yeah, I don't know. I had mixed feelings. I've seen other versions. Also, I don't know if it's still on YouTube, but there's a film clip of Angela Lansbury, who also won a Tony for playing Mama Rose. Ironically, Ethel Merman did not, but Angela Lansbury and Patti LuPone did. But anyway, the clip of Angela Lansbury was just breathtaking when she sang Mama's Turn. Sorry, Mama's Turn. So you might want to look that up and see what your opinion is of that. And then I've seen other versions. I thought Bernadette Peters was like, yeah, she was all right. And I forget who else who's done it. I mean, that role has been played by so many women of, shall we say, a certain age. And of course, Barbara Streisand very much wanted to do a movie remake of that. And Stephen Sondheim, as she puts it, was the reason she didn't get to make the movie. He gave her an ultimatum. He said, you can either star in the movie or you can direct the movie, but you cannot do both. And Barbara was like, Steve, I've done 3 movies where I have directed myself. I've proven myself. I can do this. But Stephen Sondheim, I guess, held that character very dear to his heart. And he felt that Barbara could not give her complete focus to it unless she was doing one or the other. And then there were other problems. Financing kept falling through. And then it also became an issue about Barbara Streisand's age. Many felt she was way too old to be doing the role. Now, I think she could have pulled it off, but people felt she was too old for the role. Many people said that about Lucille Ball with Mame. If she had made the movie 15 or 20 years earlier, she would have been perfect. But the age she was, it was just a little too past the time. People have their own opinions there. But and Tyne Daly. One thing, I have a wonderful Tyne Daly story. I might as well throw it out real quick. Years ago, I had a friend working at 20th Century Fox, and I had a very close friend whose aunt was in town from Texas. And she said, Chuck, would you do a favor for me? Would you talk to your friend and see if we could get a private tour of 20th Century Fox? And so I had to pull some strings, but I made it happen. And we went on some of the different sound stages. And this is when they were doing the TV show Judging Amy. And we got on there, and I forget who the coordinator was or something, but said, would you guys like to meet Tyne Daly? She's on her lunch break right now. And we're like, we didn't want to disturb her or anything, but there we went around a corner, and there was Tyne Daly. It was between scenes. She was just sitting in a comfortable chair, just eating, collecting her thoughts, what have you. And we approached her, and she was so wonderful. One of the classiest celebrities I've ever met in my life. Each person, she shook our hand. Hello, I'm Tyne. Hello, I'm Tyne. Hello, I'm Tyne. Wonderful manners right off the bat. But what I noticed, and this shouldn't surprise me because any great actor is a great listener. You have to be. But Tyne really listened to us. Really listen. And she'd pick up on something you'd say, and then she would pick up the conversation and carry it from there. And then she was a master conversationalist, the way she could direct the conversation back and forth. I learned a lot from her that day, but I was very impressed by how classy and gracious she was. So I just had to throw that out real quick. Ward, do you think Lucy doing Wildcat was the beginning of the end of her voice? Yes, I do. And others have said this. And again, this gets back to what I was saying about what a strain it is to do 8 performances a week. Lucy found it was much harder than she ever thought it was going to be. This was her first Broadway show, and she was the star. And furthermore, the show was considered rather mediocre, Wildcat. So it was very dependent on her name to sell tickets. Like if she missed a performance and the understudy went on, there would be cancellations. The show would lose a fortune. So she was under huge pressure to be on to be at every show. And I understand she started losing a lot of weight. She contracted pneumonia, became very ill, very, very ill. And also emotionally, it was a difficult time because it was only a few months after she had divorced Desi. And she and Desi both got gravely ill. They were soulmates. A case of two people who loved each other, but they couldn't live together. But they loved each other. And when they divorced, and they both talked about this, both wrote about it in their books, it was profoundly traumatic to each of them. And Lucy was the one who said, Desi and I both almost died. Our hearts were so broken. So she got very ill during that show. But so Lucy, she had vocal training from her MGM days and so forth, but I don't think she was ever fully prepared, vocally to do a show like that, 8 shows a week. So it was an enormous strain on her vocal cords. And Lucy, even during the I Love Lucy years, her natural speaking voice was much deeper. She always kind of, as she put, I dolled up my voice. She always spoke in a higher register. And she was able to sustain that for a number of years. But finally, it all took a toll. She was also a heavy cigarette smoker. And I want to emphasize something. Lucy was not an alcoholic. No, but she did like her scotch. Scotch is, someone was telling me that scotch is particularly hard on the vocal cords. So the cigarette smoking, doing the show where she had to sing and she had to project and not it. Yeah, I'm certain it damaged her vocal cords, because when she did the Lucy show, I think it was, yeah, it was in 1962. You can already hear her voice is much deeper than it was just a few years earlier on I Love Lucy. Let's see here. When did Blake Edwards pass away? I'd have to look that up. I don't know. Oh, award. So 2010. Thank you. You just answered my question there. Love the Pink Panther movies with Peter Sellers. Yeah, I've enjoyed them too. Yeah, Andy, know how I like the Sound of Music. Sound of Music for a time was the #1 film of all time. It surpassed Gone with the Wind at the box office for a while. And it still is a movie people resonate with. I mean, yeah, some of us can say it's a little saccharine and sugary. Christopher Plummer used to put the film down for that very reason. He called it The Sound of Mucus. But I will be darned, whenever that movie comes on, like Christmas time, I get sucked into it when I put it on. It's a comforting movie. When things feel dark and scary and grim and overwhelming, like the current political scape right now, what's going on in the government, sometimes putting on The Sound of Music just makes you feel safe, makes you feel okay. And it's interesting, Christopher Plummer even acknowledged that in later years. He put it down forever and ever and ever. And then he said he was at some children's birthday party or something, and they insisted on putting on The Sound of Music, and he was like, oh God, I gotta sit through that movie. But he was sitting there watching it with the children, and it suddenly occurred to him, the things I mentioned. He said it is positive, it is uplifting, and he even said, something, this movie has everything in it. It's got nuns and Nazis. Quoting Mr. Plummer. And also, he even put Julie Andrews down in the beginning. He felt she was kind of sugary and goody-goody and all that and all. But he said when they were working together, he saw how professional she was, how talented, what a good actress, solid actress she was, and he came to respect her. And then they went on in real life to become extraordinarily close best friends. Let's see. Wendy, head for the rocks. You swim diagonal. Yes, Joyce, thank you. The swimming expert. I should have asked you earlier. Thank you for chiming in there. You swim when you're caught in a riptide, and this may be a public service we're doing right now. If any of us ever have this happen to us, Joyce, thank you. You swim diagonally across the riptide, or horizontally to the shore. Thank you very much, Joyce, for that. Thank you. That's coming from an authority. Ward, I got caught in one on the Outer Banks of New York in my 20s. Long short, I managed to somehow struggle back to shore, but I was so exhausted, I literally couldn't get up for an hour. That's what I think happened to Malcolm Jamal Warner. I think, as many of us would be, he was probably terrified, caught in the moment, in the panic, as we'd be if we were being swept out to sea, and he probably was maybe fighting against it or something, and sadly he drowned. I know for myself, I haven't been caught in a riptide, but I've been caught in some heavy waves a few times I've been in the ocean, and I know how exhausting it is to, just to keep your head above the water and not go down and drown. I know that. Extreme Brands, your late husband had that happen. I'm so sorry. Joyce, I was a certified lifeguard starting in my teens. Well, you are definitely the authority here, Joyce. And I value anything you have to contribute on this subject. Well, I value what you have to contribute anyway. You've been a great, great advisor to me. By the way, Joyce is a gifted astrologer and numerologist, one of the best I've ever had in my life, and she's counseled me quite well. And I know Anastasia does not mind me saying this. Yeah, you worked with her today, and I know or it was yesterday, I forget, but I know she was very grateful to you, Joyce. And in turn, I'm grateful to you because this is a friend that I love and care about. And, she's been going through some rough times right now. I think she's going to do an interesting live stream tonight because one thing about Anastasia is she's very honest and very heartfelt. And she talks about these things on her show. Very proud of her. And so giving another plug here for my friend, Ward, yikes, that's horrible. You were held up at gunpoint. Yes. Happened twice. First time was when I was a kid delivering pizzas, held up at gunpoint. Another time was when I was working in a store and got held up at gunpoint in the back room, and had the bullet fired past my head. Life experiences. But I'm still here. I've survived. I lived to talk about it. Yeah, no, it wasn't quite like the movies where I could just take the gun from him or anything. I was saying earlier, this is where survival instinct kicks in. And my survival instinct just said, get very calm, still, and be in the moment. Just take it moment to moment to moment, and then, had I panicked, maybe it would have been worse. Maybe he would have shot me, but it didn't happen. It's a sad story what happened to him. He robbed us and he fled the store. But then I found out, again, this is sad. It's sad, but it was 30 minutes later, I heard that he was shot by a police officer when he was trying to rob another store. And he was only 22 years old. Only 22. He was an African-American kid. And something, I had people, I told what happened. They said, isn't that wonderful? He got shot. He got killed. Aren't you glad? I said, no, I am not glad. Because I was looking deep into his eyes, as I just said. I was very focused on him. And you know me, I read energy in eyes and souls. I was feeling his fear. What I was sensing, and later had this confirmed by the police, was he was in a gang, a street gang. We have a lot of those here in LA, unfortunately. And it was some sort of gang initiation or something where he had to come and rob a store or something, or go on a robbing spree. But I saw a frightened little boy is what I saw. I saw a kid, and I got very sad. I said, no, I can't be glad for that. I can't celebrate that. He had his whole life ahead of him. He made, this goes back to what we were saying earlier. We make mistakes. Now that's a pretty egregious mistake, holding a gun up to somebody like that and robbing. I'm acknowledging that, but I wish he hadn't been killed. I wish it hadn't happened that way. And I'm sorry to get serious here, but I had to tell the rest of the story here since we got there. Well, I have a Hayes question. Do you mean, Gabby Hayes, or what? Or do you mean the Hayes code at the box office, the production code? I'm not sure what you mean. Maybe you can tell me more. Ward, Helen Hayes and Charles MacArthur had a daughter, Mary, but then adopted James. Oh, thank you. And Joyce has further added here, you don't swim with the riptide. It will take you out so far, you may never be able to swim back to shore. Okay, thank you, Joyce. Thank you for clarifying that. Because I'm going by a lot of secondhand information. You're an authority here. Joyce Bulifant was once Miss Hayes' daughter-in-law. I didn't know that. I know Joyce Bulifant had several husbands, but I didn't realize that James MacArthur was one of them. Joyce Bulifant was also married to William Asher, who was married to Elizabeth Montgomery, and he was producer and director of Bewitched, and he also directed 100 episodes of I Love Lucy. And of course, Joyce Bulifant was she's still around. She worked a lot, particularly back in the 60s and 70s. Used to play Murray Slaughter's wife on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Extreme Brands, her daughter Mary died from polio at 19. Oh, that is so sad. I didn't know that. There's a lot about Helen Hayes. I'm familiar with her work, but I don't know a lot about her private life. And Jane Fonda still would say she looks great for her age. Well, she does. She's very honest about all of her cosmetic surgery and everything. But, I can tell you, living in LA, I have seen a lot of cosmetic surgery, and it does not necessarily make you look younger. In fact, it can make you look freakier, and it can even call attention to your age. So cosmetic surgery may be a tool, but it's also about exercising, doing things like yoga, posture, just your enthusiasm for life, what's in your heart. I think all these things contribute to making a person seem younger. I met Jane Fonda when she was about 76, I think, and looked amazing in person. I mean, the first thing I noticed about her was her carriage, the way she held her shoulders back, the way she stood up, the way she walked. To me, she walked like a dancer. But for a woman 76, it was like the movement and body of a woman half her age. And she did look fabulous. And I remember now, it was International Women's Day. And where I was living in West Hollywood, there was a tiny little park about 200 feet from my apartment building. And I remember that morning I was off that day. And I was initially like, I don't know if I feel like getting dressed, walking over there. And then I thought, Chuck, it's Jane Fonda, and she's 200 feet outside your door. Get off your ass. Get out the door. Go see her. And I'm glad I did. And she gave a little speech. And I had seen her on stage here in LA once. I've watched her before, but I had never stood 10 feet from her when she was in full Jane Fonda performance mode. I mean, she was in her power, and I literally could just feel waves of energy hitting me, literally just waves of energy. It was so powerful and forceful, and I'll never forget that. But to get the point, she looks incredible still. I think she's 87 now. Let's see. I wish this thing wouldn't jump when I scroll down. Then I have to find my place again. Sorry, I've got to go back here. I got to go way back. Gee, why did it do this? A lot of comments here. Sorry, folks. Okay, I'm going to read through these, and then I've got to get off of here by about 6:50 or so, because I don't want to compete with Anastasia, and I want you guys to go over to her if you feel like it. Andy, is Gabby Hayes related to Helen? I don't think so. No. I think that was a stage name for him. But I don't know about him I don't know much about Gabby Hayes. I'm so sorry. I can't really tell you more than that, but I'm pretty sure he's not related to Helen Hayes. Anyway, but could be wrong. People can correct me if I am, please. Andy. Ward. Andy. Actually, Miss Hayes was her middle name. Her original surname was Brown. Thank you. It may have been her mother's original surname. Another show that got a bad rap because of history, which wasn't fair, Dukes of Hazzard. Yeah. I think, somebody's giving me hearts. Thank you. I think because of the Confederate flag and the Southern stuff. I don't know. I didn't really watch the Dukes of Hazzards that much. So I'm just speculating why there might be bad raps or something. But I haven't heard anything really bad about the show. I think it's just people look on it with a certain sense of lightness and humor. Certainly Daisy Duke, the short shorts to this day is a modern term we still use for guys too. When they wear short shorts, they say, I'm wearing my Daisy Dukes. Anastasia should talk about her crush on one of the actors on that show. Sorry, Anastasia. I hope I'm not saying too much. I think it was the blonde actor, John Schneider. And she got to meet him at her job at the Roosevelt. And she'd always had a little crush on him. Oh, yes, Goddess Val. There was a fabulous documentary about Rosemary. I think it's still on Amazon, and Rosemary participated in it. It was one of the last things she ever did. She had a fascinating life, and she was also a very close friend of Lucille Ball's. Joyce, I had my lifeguarding certificate. You have to take recertification classes every 3 years. Well, that's good. It's kind of like with first aid. Years ago, I took a first aid course, but I never got recertified. Now, I'd have to start from scratch again, but I can see why lifeguards would have to be recertified at least every 3 years, especially when you're literally guarding lives. Until I was in my 60s, I taught lifeguarding and CPR classes for the Red Cross for years. That's just fabulous, Joyce. That's fabulous. Ward Alice Bleach guy made a sound movie as far back as 1905. Well, I have seen early sound movies. I think I even saw a sound movie that was made in the late 1880s, 1890s. Now, granted, very primitive, like with the phonograph record synced to the film, and I'm sure it was like that. And I saw one, I think this was on YouTube, made in 1913, and the sound was surprisingly good. I mean, the sound was synchronized to the actors' mouths and everything, and yeah. Oh, yeah. There's scores of sound movies. There were a number of sound movies made in 1922. Eddie Cantor, the great vaudeville comedian, radio movies, he made a sound movie in 1922, just a short subject. But it's my understanding that when Warner Brothers made The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson, this was a more innocent time. We didn't have Google search and the internet and stuff, and people were less savvy about these type of things. Warner Brothers tried to bury, and I say that literally and figuratively, bury a lot of these old movies, put them away, these early sound endeavors, because they wanted to publicize The Jazz Singer as the world's first sound motion picture. But it's not true. Even Al Jolson himself, and it's on YouTube, there is a short subject he made, sound short subject he made in 1925, 2 years before The Jazz Singer. So anyway, history gets revised. Extreme Brands. I love classical radio shows. Oh, me too. I have thousands of them. I have them in the MP3 format. And for fun, I put them all onto a 32 gigabyte flash drive. 32 gigabytes will hold thousands of shows. And I took all of my radio shows and I had the dates on them. So I tried to arrange them. First of all, I went year by year, 1934, 35, 36, 37, so forth. But I then took them and arranged them week by week and night by night, and tried to pair shows on the same evening and stuff as they originally were broadcast. So that was a fun project for me. But a lot of those old radio shows hold up quite well. And some nights they're more fun than television. They really are. Let's see here. It says, who was Clark Gable to me? Oh, Clark Gable. Who was he married to? Well, he had 5 wives. But you might be thinking of Carol Lombard. And Danny, of course, just said that after that. That was the most famous of his marriages. Let me see here. His first wife was a woman named Josephine Dillon. Her second wife, see my memory here? His second wife was a woman named Maria Langham. And both women were a lot older than Clark Gable, but they were mentors to him and they took care of him. One of them, I think it was Josephine, she was a drama coach and she taught Gable how to act. And anyway, the first 2 wives were a lot older. And then the great love of his life, his soulmate, Carol Lombard, was his 3rd wife, and she was tragically killed in a plane crash selling war bonds in 1942. And I've been to their graves. They are Well, they're not. They're in wall crypt. They're interred, but they are side by side. It's very poignant, and that was because Gable's final wife, Kay Spreckles, she knew that. She knew that Carol was his great love, and she gave permission for him to be interred next to Carol. And she was also gracious. Their home, I saw a picture once. There was a beautiful painting of Carol Lombard over the mantle, and to me, that's very gracious when a new wife, allows for that. That he was widowed and he loved her dearly. And of course, the fourth wife was Lady Sylvia Ashley. That was a disastrous marriage. Didn't work out. But anyway, those were the five wives of Clark Gable. So I hope I answered your question for you. Andy, how about Bogart? What about Bogart? What are you asking about him? And seeing Danny Sing Sing, New York. Yeah, that's where Nicky Arnstein was housed, and Fanny Brice would go to visit him there. Let's see. Let me scroll down here. Oh, so Ward, you answered the question also about the five wives of Clark Gable. Yeah. No, there was just something very poignant about seeing those two graves side by side. And Carol Lombard's grave says Carol Lombard Gable. And she was very proud of that. Near the end of her life, when she would sign autographs, she'd always sign Carol Lombard Gable. Wait, Andy, so Lombard was married with Bogart? No, she was never married to Bogart. You're thinking of Lauren Bacall. I'm sure that's who you're thinking of. No, Lombard only had two husbands, William Powell, who was her co-star, and after they were divorced, he was her co-star. And Sasha, getting into something here at Amazon box. He was her co-star after they were divorced, and they did the classic comedy My Man Godfrey. In fact, William Powell was first cast in it, and he said, "Oh, you've got to cast my ex-wife in this. She was born to play this part." They kept a good friendship with each other. And what's interesting, after Carol died, well, William Powell and Clark Gable had been friends anyway, but they became closer friends right up until Gable's death in 1960. They were very close. And I've always thought Carol would have smiled. She would have loved that her two ex-husbands were so close to each other and had that kind of harmony. Danny, well, I think a lot of people assume that Clark Gable was married to Lombard only because it's legendary. Gable and Lombard. It's like Romeo and Juliet, Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall. It's one of the great, Lucy and Desi. It's one of the great love stories of all time. But no, there were two wives before and two wives after. She was right in the middle. But Carol was something really special. Oh my God, I love her. Here's Sasha behind me. Ward, no, oh, you just answered it also. I go down the comments and I see my questions have already been answered. No, Miss Lombard was never married to Bogart. Then if I were Clark Gable after Carol were killed, I'd never marry again. Well, he did not marry for many years, a number of years. I think he waited 7-8 years before he married again. And he was profoundly traumatized. Carol's room, they had separate rooms. I mean, they had their own bedroom and all, but they each had their own spaces. Also, Carol had her makeup table and her dressing, her closet with all of her gowns and everything. And Gable refused to have her room clean, touched. There was face powder on the mirror. He wouldn't let the housekeeper clean that. He kept her room preserved almost like a tomb. And Lucille Ball was a close friend of both of them. In fact, Carol Lombard, Lucy said Carol Lombard was her single greatest comedic influence. But they're all, look, there's my Sasha. She's being a good girl right now, or at least for the moment. She may start kicking and screaming in a moment. But Lucy talked about this. She said that she was convinced Clark Gable wanted to commit suicide, or he had a death wish. She said after Carol died, he would get on this motorcycle and just go like 90 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, just recklessly driving around. And she said it was like he wanted to kill himself. He didn't care if he lived or died. And in fact, one of the things he did after Carol died, a few months later, it was World War II, of course, he enlisted in the Army as a buck private. And he worked his way up the ranks. He became a captain, but he was, I think, he was, I said Army, but it might have been Air Force, because he flew planes over Nazi Germany. And again, people who were there, well, one thing, his fellow servicemen said he was a wonderful man, just no star trip, just down to earth, sweet, warm. Everybody adored him. But people said he had a death wish. It's like he didn't care if he lived or died. And those missions he flew over Nazi Germany were as dangerous as anything possibly could have been, for a lot of obvious reasons. But one of the things, Hitler, when he found out that Gable was in the American Armed Forces and what he was doing, he put a bounty out on Gable's head for his capture. And his plan was to put Gable in a zoo, in the Berlin Zoo, in a cage, and put him on display. And Gable said to friends, if I get shot down, I'm not going to try to save myself. I'm just going to go down with the plane. He knew that. Gable knew that. And someone else who was very brave for similar reasons, Marlene Dietrich. Oh, she was considered a huge traitor to Germany because of her allegiance to America during World War II. And Hitler had a bounty out for her. And Hitler said he was going to capture her, shave her head bald, strip her naked, and also put her in a cage in the Berlin Zoo. And Dietrich was a brave woman. In fact, she was even awarded medals of valor. I think the French Americans both awarded her medals of honor. She was actually out on the battlefields in Germany, entertaining troops, American troops. And sometimes she was like a quarter of a mile from where the Nazi army were. She could have been captured at any time and would have suffered a brutal fate, but she was brave. Gable was brave. Anyway, hi, Sabrina. Thank you for joining. Wait, Andy, I heard Janet Leigh won a Tony Curtis. Yeah, he was her husband. I don't think she ever won a Tony Award. I don't know about that, actually. Though, ironically, Scarlett Johansson played Janet Leigh. It was the movie with Anthony Hopkins where he played Hitchcock. And Scarlett Johansson did win a Tony Award. But anyway, we'll tie in there. Goddess Val. I think that's why I was so bothered by Tony performance, the pushing of yes, Audra McDonald, the pushing of the voice. And it's so lovely. Yes, I've been a fan of Audra McDonald singing since the late 1990s. I was given a CD of her music. I think it was her very first album. I was given it for Christmas. Her voice is a treasure. I've also seen Audra McDonald in concert. I saw her perform many years ago at the Hollywood Bowl. And yeah, Goddess Val, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those guttural sounds, those primal screams she was doing in that performance. I was worried. I was like, oh my God, your voice. Be careful, be careful, be careful. And so I think it made people uncomfortable. But I think as an actress, Audra McDonald wanted us to be uncomfortable. She clearly was going for her own interpretation of that role. It's been done so many times, and she wanted to put her own imprint on that. And she just went for a very raw, psychotic place. Yeah. I don't. You probably noticed that also. And I forgot something else I was going to say about Audra McDonald. I truthfully, I was even concerned about her when she played Billie Holiday, which she won a Tony for. And that was done, recorded as an HBO special. And she did an impeccable impersonation of Billie Holiday. I mean, just you could close your eyes. It sounded just like Billie singing, but I was even worried the strain she was putting on that exquisite voice of hers to do that. Yeah. Oh, and Andy, thank you. I did agree with you about the point about celebrities making mistakes. I just wanted to make sure you didn't feel I was slighting you or ignoring you. Sometimes this is a little bit of a juggling act here with these comments, and I see it is 6:52, so I've got to wrap up real soon here. Let me go through these here. I'm going to speed through the comments a little more there. Or there's a big difference. There's a difference between a mere mistake and doing criminal acts that deliberately victimize others again and again. I'll leave it at that. And I am in agreement with you there, Ward. Yes, very much so. I could practically do a whole show on this, and I've got like a minute or two here, so I'm going to leave it at that also. But I do agree with you. Tyne Daly played it very dark. Amazing performance. So lucky to have seen her live. Yeah, she was here in LA. I had a chance to see her do it. So unfortunately, all I've seen are the YouTube clips. And I think I incorrectly said two women, Angela Lansbury and Patti LuPone, won Tonys. I just remembered Tyne Daly also won a Tony. So if I'm right here, three women have won Tonys for playing Mama Rose. Ironically, Ethel Merman was not one of them who originated it. But no, Andy, you make a valid point too. You do. I'm sorry to speed through this here. I do apologize. I'm just running out of time here. Oh my God, Goddess Val, you saw Patti LuPone in Evita Live. I wish I'd seen that. I know Patty's been quite controversial lately, but I am a fan of hers, and I would like to see her in performance. She's going to do a concert. I think it's in Costa Mesa, in Orange County next February. I might try to get tickets for that. Yeah, Andy Tyne played. She was in Cagney and Lacey. Sabrina, one of my favorite singers. I wonder if you heard any stories about Kay Starr. Her voice is out of this world. I do agree with you. I'm sorry to say I don't have stories about Kay Starr. I can't really talk about her, but I do agree with you about her lovely, lovely voice. Didn't Lucy call Desi before he died? Oh, yeah, I've told that story many times on the show here. I just don't have time to repeat it again. But, if you bring it up next week, I'll mention it. It's very poignant. It was basically Lucy's voice was the last that Desi ever heard, the last words he ever said to her. And this is a fact because Lucie Arnaz was there. He said, Lucy just kept saying, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Lucy could hear this because she was holding the phone to Desi's ear. He was very, very ill. And he very weakly said, I love you too, sweetheart. And then according to Lucie Arnaz, he closed his eyes and he went into a coma. And then he died 2 days later. And she said that was the last conversation he ever had. So I guess I did kind of tell the story a little. Oh yeah, Ward, you just brought that up. I scroll down and I see somebody's already answered what I just talked about. Yes, and I told that. And I even have a video in front of George Burns and Gracie Allen's graves and the bench where George Burns used to sit and visit each month. And I tell that story. Yeah, I'm sorry. I've got to speed through these because I've got to get off here at 6:55. I just don't want to compete with Anastasia. Oh, yeah. Ward, you mentioned Miss Andrews was taking care of her toddler daughter while going through a divorce, yet she was the one who kept everything together. And, similarly, Barbara Streisand, when she was making Funny Girl, her son Jason, I think, was only about a year or maybe a year and a half old. He was definitely a baby, and she was going through her marital troubles with Elliot Gould at the time. So, but yet it did not affect her performance by any means. Let's see, some more praise for Joyce. Saying, I wish I'd considered your advice before you made that swim. Yeah, Joyce is a fascinating lady. She's got so many things to talk about. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through these quick here. Oh, and Chris, hi Chris, hi Jim, thank you for joining. I don't know if you heard me say this, but my friend Anastasia goes on in just a few minutes, her show, and so I've got to sign off here. But thank you for joining. I appreciate you so very much. Oh yeah, somebody said a lot of marriages, and oh shoot, my thing just jumped here on me again. Shoot, I've got to find my place again, and I'm running out of time. Yes, Jim. Yes, Anastasia is next. Like 3 minutes. I'm really rushing through this right now. So I might have to, if you want, bring the questions up again next week, and I promise I will answer. I'm so sorry, because I never, ever want to be dismissive of any of you, but I'm kind of having to here. Let me jump down here. Yeah, Lombard and Jean Harlow. Kate, hi Kate. Lombard and Jean Harlow were both talented at Earth Broads. I actually had an elderly friend. He passed away many years ago, but he knew Jean Harlow back in the 30s, and he said to me, very classy lady, very just beautiful manners, elegant. She dressed beautifully, but he said the thing he remembered about her, she was a lady. And he meant that in the best way, a lady. Let's see, Kate saying hi to my Sasha. Andy, you're back. Andy, okay. I'm sorry, I got to go through here fast. You sure were lucky to get me Tyne Daly. Yes, I was. And also the fact that it was such a lovely meeting. It was just one of my favorite celebrity encounters ever, because I was so impressed with her class and her grace. I mean, not just as a celebrity, but as a person. I learned a lot from her that day that I have tried to do when I listen to people and when I have conversations. I always remembered the beautiful example she set. Who was Tyne's partner, Cagney and Lacey? That was the wonderful Sharon Gless. Yeah, Jim. No, it's true. Lucy and Desi never stopped loving each other. I've told a lot of stories on here. I've got a lot of videos talking about it. And I certainly, if I had time, I would tell some stories now. Okay, I think I reached the end of the comments here. It is 6:59. So I am going to sign out. Please join my friend Anastasia Pavlov on the Sacred Spears channel. I know a lot of you have been going over there, and I know it means the world to Anastasia, because she's trying to start out with this and build up subscribers and viewers. And I want to thank you, because it means a lot to me personally when you help her out. I'm going to sign off. I'm going to be on Dr. Whimsy Anderson's show tomorrow and Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, on her channel, The Oracle of Whimsy. Tomorrow it's called Taco Tuesdays, where it's a very different show. We talk about news events and what's happening and so forth. And I will be here next week. And if I missed any of your questions or anything, please bring them back up next week and we will get to them. I promise you. So anyway, thank you, everyone. I'm going to sign out at 7 o'clock. Her show's about to start now. Thank you very much. Goodbye.